So that's what I'm saying, Sammy. And I know that I've been going on and on. I had to get all of that out of my system before I came online right now to talk about the great Ben Johnson and everything that has happened over the last couple of days. The last time we talked, it was right after the immediacy of everything that was happening with Ben Johnson. Now I've had an opportunity to not only collect my thoughts, I've been on multiple shows expressing the same viewpoint. And now we've got a lot of the stuff from the press conference to go over today. So it really is, it's hard to believe, Monday, how quickly this all came together, because when we're sitting there, I think that we were texting and we were like, hey, you know what? We got to be ready. Especially as somebody who lives on the West Coast. I'm like, I got to be ready. Cause I can't be sleeping in or anything like that. Cause this would drop at any moment. And then obviously it did. He was introduced. They did the Tuesday thing. And then now on Wednesday, we got the press conference. And now it's all about looking forward. We'll take a look back and study some of the things that happened that kind of led to this moment. But still, it's time to look forward. It's a great time to be a fan of the Chicago Bears. And Sammy, let's just go ahead and start the show.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Rank.
It's Hester trying to work it back to the middle. Gets past the first wave, and here he goes. It's Hester inside the 30. Hester's going to take it all the way for a touchdown. And no flag, 92 yards.
Brought to you by Circa Sports Illinois, the sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
It's Wednesday night. You know what that means? It is time for Take It to the Rank, a great Wednesday night of football, because not only do you have Take It to the Rank, you also have the Tape Never Lies Network coming up in about 90 minutes. And, of course, AEW, the Challenge reunion. I finally caught up. Johnny's Angels won. I think we all knew that Jordan was going to win. But Johnny's Angels, congratulations to them. So by proxy, Johnny Bananas won. So I will go with that. But in any event, let's talk about the big winners of the offseason so far. And I know that we've been here before. And I know a lot of people are like, hey, you guys have won the offseason before. Well, I'm like, all right, well, okay. But now it feels different. And here to talk about it from the great CHGO. Actually, I'm upset with CHGO, but I'm not upset with this guy. It is the great Greg Braggs. Greg, how are you, buddy?
Let's go. What did we do? What did we do over here?
What did we do over here? You know what you did? It's what you didn't do. I've been sitting here watching all these clips from CHGO. They're like, oh, here's Carmen Vitale weighing in. Here's Field Yates. Here's Curtin Jerk. You know who hasn't been on CHGO?
Oh, no.
The announcement of Ben Johnson? Me.
That's
Adam
my
Rank.
fault.
Friend of the program, or so I thought. Obviously, normally we would be on Monday nights. I know we got moved to Fridays, but still, I kept waiting by my phone. I'm sitting here waiting for my phone to buzz. I'm like, hey, no. I canceled it at tea time because I'm like, well, I think CHGO is going to probably want me. Oh, no, they don't.
No,
they don't want me. They want Carmen and did you have Kyle Brandt on? When did Kyle Brandt come on? Did you have Kyle? Please tell me you did not.
He did not. You know what? That's on me. That's on me. That is on me. I can't blame it on anyone else in here. As much as I'd love to blame it on Mark Carmen, I just can't do it. That falls on me. That Adam Rank didn't make the mega show. But you're going to be we are a team here. So I'm going to make up for it on Friday. We will make sure to do right by you in any way we possibly can. And so to try to extend that olive branch and make sure that you understand just how much I value our friendship, we were currently live on CHGO Bears, breaking down the press conference right now. And live on the set, I walked off. I said to the mic, I'm gone. I'm going to do the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank, and walked off. And that hey, this is my employer. And I said, peace be the journey. I'm going over to the Sick Podcast. I'll see you guys later. So, that shows you just how serious I am about being invested in you.
Yeah, that's showing that you have some stroke with the company.
I also might be fired by tomorrow, so I'll probably need to find gainful employment with you a little more serious if they find out I'm walking off the set. But, 2 hours in, with the CHGO Bears, breaking down the press conference. Big day at Ellis Hall. So back-to-back shows, just keep it running. And then when this is over, maybe I'll just jump right into the Tape Never Lies, and we'll just podcast until.
Oh my God, yeah,
Intent.
If I didn't have soccer practice here in this evening, we have to do soccer practice tonight because I've got a Cal State Fullerton game on Thursday, so I had to move my practice schedule and that, or else I would plan on being on for 5 hours this evening just to kind of dissect everything that's not only gone on today, but over the last couple of days. And you were one of the guys that last time we got together, we were talking about what do we want for the Lions? Do we want them to go to the Super Bowl? I personally was sort of pulling for that because you and I are both going to be there for Super Bowl week. And I was thinking about Super Bowl Monday night, the welcome thing. And I legitimately thought the Lions were going to be there. We're already writing bits about what we were going to do with Ben Johnson and just thinking about like anybody who covers a Chicago sport or whoever covers the Bears, we're going to be competing. Like we're going to make a mockery of Super Bowl Monday night because we're going to make fools of ourselves trying to top each other on a Ben Johnson thing while he's trying to get prepared for the Super Bowl. We're like, let's talk about Caleb Williams, You were the one, though, who said, like, well, I want them to lose to Washington. And I'm like, there's no way that happens. And you were correct. And so I didn't see you after the Lions lost. Were you convinced this was all going to come together this quickly?
No, I would have, just as much as I've understood how Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles are so process-based. You saw the way this coaching search had already been underway. There were over 20 candidates that were, for the most part, remote interviews with the exception of, one or two guys, right? And so now you get to this point, Ben Johnson loses. I think the first alarm that went off was them immediately announcing after the game, Jake Glazer making the report that they're going to interview Eddie George in person, and that would, make the Rooney Rule compliant with their only two interviews there. So that just showed that how they have a certain process, but now how much intent they have to go for the big fish. Now, on the other side of things, when you look at Ben Johnson, I assumed that he would, out of respect to the process, interview in person with the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Chicago Bears, and then make his decision from there. So for him to take this deal without even going to Soldier Field in person shows just how much he wanted this job. And that makes me so excited as a Bears fan. And then hearing everything he had to say today, I think he understands the totality of the job and not just all the glitz and glamour of being the Bears head coach, having a great quarterback in Caleb Williams. He acknowledged today, no, I see the challenge ahead. I know there's things that need to be fixed. And he still wanted to come here with all that being said. And that gives me a lot of hope for the future that Ben Johnson is the right guy for the job.
Yeah, that's one of the things when he's not taking other interviews, you're like, wait, is that a good or a bad thing? Like, wait, what is happening here? Why are you so anxious to get here? But I think it is a pretty good omen, and I think it's a pretty good indication of how serious the Bears were. I think that, through all of this, and I know you've been one of these people that leads the charge to sell the team and all this stuff, but, George came through. Yep. I think that, listen, I love you, and I know, I see what you've been saying and everything too. So
no, give me the
no, but I know that I know that you've acknowledged him, but I'm going to give you an opportunity. I need you to say it on this show now, not the one I wasn't invited to earlier the last 2 days, but because this is a thing, and I know that I always come off as a shill, and I'm like, hey, like, the McCaskies, like these families look like they can't run NFL teams until they hire the right people, and then you're like, oh, Sheila Ford's a genius all of a sudden. You know what I'm saying? The Hunt family, great organization that didn't win a Super Bowl for 50 years. But now it feels like, hey, George, when pressed upon this, when he needed to answer the challenge, and it took him some time to get there, but he's here now. How do we feel? We feel pretty good about that?
Yeah, you're 100% right. I'll eat the crow in terms of not just George McCaskey, but I also said that I thought maybe the best route was, and I'm a huge Ryan Poles advocate, But at the end of the season, I started to acknowledge that maybe from a process-based decision, that maybe cleaning house, wiping the slate clean, and letting your coach and GM start on the same timeline, that was something I thought was probably the right route to take. Both were wrong. Ben Johnson said his history dating back to Boston College with Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles was something that attracted Ben Johnson to coming to Chicago. He said today that the family environment that George McCaskey has created here at House Hall, something that Bears fans can be very critical of times, including myself, of not being a serious football organization and leaning too heavily into the family first business. Well, guess what? Ben Johnson said that was one of the biggest attractions to coming here as he brought his wife and kids over from Detroit. So if you're the flowers and the credit has to be just as loud as the criticism. And so I am here to tell you that George McCaskey, Kevin Warren, and Ryan Poles deserve all the credit in the world for not just talking the talk, but then walking the walk and getting this done. And so here I am bowing at your mercy because you have been trying to get me to have the cooler heads prevail. But you know me as a fan, wearing my heart on my sleeve, and the rage that we go through in a 10-game losing streak and a 14-game losing streak, and feeling like that things are never going to change around here. And sometimes looking at the big picture can elude us as fans. And I'm here to tell you, I think that these guys did an incredible job and they deserve a ton of credit.
Yeah, it's the old Illinois way, and whenever, my dad would always tell stories about growing up with his grandfather, who would be this gruff guy who would never pay up big money or anything like that. And I remember my dad, when he was a kid, he told me this story like, hey, when I grew up, I always wanted a sled. All my friends had sleds. I never had one. And my grandfather always used to tell me, you're not getting one, blah, blah, blah. Stop asking. And then one day he woke up and there's a sled waiting for him. And then my dad wanted to go thank his grandfather, and his guy was like, it wasn't for me, like that kind of like tough guy, Irishman and things like that. And similarly, like it feels like George McCaskey has been denying us this opportunity for quite some time. And I think that anybody who is apprehensive about the process, understandably, when you look back at guys like Mark Trestman and John Fox and all these things, but slowly but surely, the Bears have been opening up to modern NFL football, be it just adding an extra assistant GM, getting rid of Ted Phillips and bringing in a serious person like Kevin Warren, who, allowed them to go out there, buy land to build a stadium, which this, and you've been on board with this about like, they're going to announce it soon and they're going to build it in Arlington Heights. Like you don't have all that land to not do it. And again, it mirrors what Stan Kroenke went through out here in Los Angeles. So a lot of that stuff's going on. So, and slowly but surely the Bears have become a serious football organization, serious, getting a quarterback, now getting a head coach. And it's been wonderful to see this unfold. And you alluded to some of the things that were said at the press conference today. We do have some clips lined up. Why don't we start playing those right now? Number one, Sammy, I think the first one we have is what Ben Johnson said about Caleb Williams this afternoon.
Football in the NFL is quarterback driven. That is no secret. You can look at analytics right now. Quarterback success is a higher predictor of winning and losing than turnover ratio, which it's been for 20 plus years. Okay, that's changed. So there's no doubt Caleb played a large component into my decision. He is a phenomenal talent that had, as many quarterbacks do, an up and down rookie year. Where I see my role is as a supporter of him. This offense will be calibrated with him in mind. We're going to build this thing. This is not simply a dropping of a previous playbook down on the table and starting there. Nope. We're ripping this thing down to the studs, and we're going to build it up with him first and foremost, and then with the pieces around him next. I really look forward to challenging him and
what's interesting is I was listening to a couple of guys on the driving range yesterday. One of them had Packer head covers on his drivers and stuff. Another guy had a USC bag talking about like, I don't know if Caleb's going to fit into this guy's system, but listening to Ben Johnson, it says my system has to fit him. it's got to be pretty refreshing to sit here to listen to a head coach being like, no, we're going to cater this to the quarterback instead of what often happens the other way around.
100%. It was exciting to listen to his offensive philosophy and talking about the quarterback being, it's a quarterback driven league and so many different things where he's talking about building that relationship and that trust with him. And so, yeah, to me, the biggest takeaway I had from the day was that this wasn't about rhetoric and promises, that you got to earn. You can make all the promises now, but you got to work and earn it to get to the goals you want to get to. And so there was no rhetoric, there was no acronyms, there were no euphemisms. It was a plan and showing you, this is my vision, this is how I executed, and this is how hard we have to work to try to attain those goals. And that's for us as fans. Like, we're tired of the word salad. We've had enough word salad here for the last few coaches to last us a lifetime. And so this guy came in here and was extremely direct and left all that rhetoric to the side. And so when he talked about his vision and his plan for Caleb Williams, I think that spoke to that. And for us, that's, of the utmost importance.
Yeah. And I know I listen, and I want to take Ben Johnson's word for it. But Commanders fan 4869 on Twitter says that Caleb Williams is a bust. So I'm trying to weigh whose opinion I value the most. But I guess I'll lean towards Ben Johnson on this one. But it feels this job, as much as it feels like we worried too much about the Tom Brady spending 4 minutes with him before the game, or Trevor Lawrence is also there. This is Caleb. And I don't think that you could get any bigger of an endorsement than having Ben Johnson come out there and say, listen, this is why I'm here. This is what we need to do. And, so all the haters, you can eat it right now as far as
and it was some powerful moments in that press conference to start the entire presser, and he makes his opening statement and he says, Caleb and a few other players, Cole Kmet, DJ Moore, and a few others were there. He looks right at Caleb and says, Caleb, you're a special player, but it's going to take more than just you on this team. That's hey, giving him his credit, but commanding the room, showing how this hierarchy is going to work. And so later he goes on to say, to your point where, hey, I'm going to build this from what the quarterback is comfortable with. Yes. But then at one point he also adds on, the quarterback has to see it through the play caller's eyes. So when you talk about them building this relationship, I think those are some things that are the non-negotiables for him. He's showing you the criteria that has to be met in order for the quarterback to be successful and the offense to be successful, and ultimately for Ben Johnson to be successful. And so I like the clear vision and the directness in which he spoke today.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. One of the things that he talked about was how much he wanted to be in this division. A lot of the things, when we were going last week, when everybody was trying to make their case on Twitter or social media or wherever, Jacksonville makes the most sense because the AFC South is garbage, but people were like, he should come to Las Vegas because he can hire his own offensive coordinator. And who would want to coach in the NFC North? He had talked about that today. So, Sammy, if you have that clip, I know I'm probably going out of order, where he talked about the division, I would like to hear his words on that if we could, please.
I know this is the toughest division of football right now. There's 3 teams that made the playoffs this year. I've got tremendous amount of respect for the coaches and the players in this league, having competed against them for the last 6 years. Dan Campbell, Kevin O'Connell, you're talking about 2 guys that are up for Coach of the Year awards as the season ends here. And to be quite frank with you, I kind of enjoyed beating Matt LaFleur twice a year.
I do know that Cheesehead TV muted the periphery. You hear people reacting to him talking about Matt LaFleur in that instance. Now, it wasn't. Now, you got to remember, too, it's a press conference. So Kevin Fishbane is not going to hoot and holler. Like if Greg and I were there, we would have been like, yeah, mother, we would have gone off. We would have had a moment. But Fishbane and some of the others who were there got to be a little bit more subdued. But you did hear some things. You heard some people react to it. I gotta say this though, when it comes to what he said, I love the fact that he addressed Matt LaFleur personally, because too often, and this happened with some of the previous coaches who come in here, they get a little crib sheet. Be like, yeah, I love deep dish pizza. Hey, I don't put mustard on a hot dog. Hey, Green Bay suck like that. Okay, we get it. You're playing to the crowd. This was personal. That's not an accident. And it wasn't placating to the crowd. I think it was personal, and I loved it. I loved every second of that, and I'm glad he called out LaFleur.
100%. I mean, it just shows that he's not ducking the smoke here in the NFC North. And when you talked about like people saying, well, why would he want to stay in this division? Well, he has a lot of confidence in himself that he'll still be able to hang, whether it's here in Detroit or now here in Chicago. So I like that he's up to the challenge. And again, he picked Chicago because he believes he can take on that challenge. He would have ran from here and gone out of this division and potentially, go to Jacksonville and be in the AFC South, right? You got a quarterback there. You can play the Colts twice a year. No, he said, I wanted to be in this division. I know this division. And so to me, that gives me a lot of confidence that because this is his livelihood. When a coach decides to finally make that jump and become a head coach, you only get so many chances at that. Look at Matt Nagy. Not every coach gets to go running back to Andy Reid and win a few Super Bowls. If you swing and miss on your decision of where you want to go as a head coach, and he passed up opportunities last year, you only get one shot. And so what happens after this if it doesn't work? No promises. So he's saying, I know it's going to work here, and that's why I chose to come here. This is where I want to be, as he said when he walked into Hallis Hall yesterday, which was another great part of this whole thing. Everything that happened at Hallis Hall today, and then going to Hallis Hall yesterday and walking in and commanding that room. Because, for me, he's got to command that locker room, and that's still yet to be determined. But a big part of his criteria here to be successful in Chicago is to not just command the locker room, but to command Hallis Hall as the guy in charge of this operation. And to me, the way he's speaking to everyone so far, we're a day and a half into this. I understand that. But so far, he's showing that he's willing to take on the challenge to command Hallis Hall, and that is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and it's one of the things, too. It is a commitment to winning. I know that Blutarski, or that guy from the Packer thing, was like, they're always obsessed with us. Like, bitch, you're still sitting here watching our press conferences, commenting on us more than your own team.
Peter Bukowski tweets about the Bears 8 times a day.
Don't say that you're not obsessed with the Chicago Bears, because you absolutely are. And by the way, you're not committed to winning, or what you were committed to winning to is winning Toyotathon. We should rename Green Bay Toyotathon Town, because that's all you win and that's all you care about. Matt LaFleur would rather worry about having manicured eyebrows and winning 11 games and then getting bounced out of the playoffs. The Super Bowl is 8th on his list of things that are important to him, other than making sure that he can get a Packers jacket provided to him by Lululemon. We get it. You're fine. You guys, you have your role.
Other thing too. They're talking about Green Bay. Yeah, you're in our division. You're one of our division rivals. You made the playoffs this year. We want to beat you. So we're not going to pretend like you don't exist. We're here to try to take your spot. And so Ben Johnson's not going to hide from the elephant in the room. And we're going to acknowledge you as one of our rivals here in this division. And one of these days, maybe we'll get the best of you. But, to pretend like you don't exist doesn't mean that it's going to do any good.
One of these days, to my knowledge, Caleb Williams has never lost in Lambeau Field. So that's why we're upset. Like that, why we're not upset. Like,
How dare you?
Our quarterback, our coach beats you routinely all the time. Our quarterback has never lost in Lambeau Field. We feel pretty good about this. We don't need it. Like, and we don't, it would be random if he started like calling out the Tennessee Titans. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are we calling out the Titans? Like, there's no reason for why not the guys that we're playing against twice a year, which is great. And I love it. And I think it sets a tone, but not only for the fans. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that fans eat up. He also had a message for the players. So, Sam, if we can tee up his message to the players, 4 of which, as you mentioned, Greg, were there at Hallis Hall today.
I do have a message here for the players. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. The bar has been set higher than it's ever been set before. The only way for this team and for you as individual players to reach your potential is to be pushed and to be challenged. And that's exactly what I and my staff plan on doing. We are going to push, we're going to challenge. And along with those high standards, there's also going to be a high level of support as well. Everybody in this building is going to be all about helping you guys out. How do you become the best versions of yourselves? That's what it's going to be about from start to finish. When you walk in, it'll be crystal clear, the communication, the structure, and the consistency, and that will never waver. Our mission starting this spring is to win and to win now.
Oh, I love the end of that. Where he's talking about winning now, understanding that this roster is a roster that can win games. It has proven the ability to win games. Because again, we talk about this all the time. Like Caleb doesn't get credit for rallying the team against the Commanders, against the Packers the first time, Minnesota, Detroit. Those are 4 right there. And I know we're starting to get into the same semantics we were getting into coming into this season with Matt Eberflus, but the message has changed. And there was somebody who is holding people accountable. And when you think about it, when you think about the Lions, you know, I remember, and I don't know if he's going to come over and be a part of the staff. I would love Anton Randall L to be a part of this staff. Who knows what's going to happen, or else I hope he gets an opportunity to be the offensive coordinator for the Lions or something like that. But, you know, when J-Mo gets into a tiff with Tyreek Stevenson of all people, you know, the Lions were quick to put that got put out immediately. Like they did not let that simmer. Antoine Randall L and that coaching staff was on him, making sure that everybody was on point, getting their stuff together. Like you're not going to lose to a team like that was as poorly coached as the Bears, not on Thanksgiving. That's the kind of accountability I think a lot of us are striving for, is to see that, to eliminate some of these things where you question players' effort or anything like that. Because that was never an issue with the Lions over the last couple of years. Like you didn't question whether they were there to win or not. And they really didn't, to my recollection, I don't remember them having like huge mental breakdowns where they were undisciplined, where they would have allowed a play like the Tyreek Stevenson play to happen.
Yeah, the biggest thing that we've talked about through this coaching process, honestly, surprisingly enough, really hasn't been about Caleb Williams. As much as you would think that would be at the center of every discussion on how we're picking a coach. On our show on CHGO Bears, on this program here, every time we've talked, it's about the culture. We've talked about how this team needs to get tougher. And so when you hear Ben Johnson look his players dead in the eye and say, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. Now, I've had the pleasure of working with Cole Kmet the last couple of years here at CHGO Bears. I promise you that resonated with him, because this is where this team needs. That's the message they need to hear, is that we got to start getting uncomfortable around here and setting a standard that's much higher than we tried to set for ourselves last year as a team. So I'm excited to see that come to fruition. And these guys need to start holding each other accountable on a whole nother level. And that's from Ben Johnson to his players, and that's the players to each other. So setting that standard, he talks about later about learning to be a professional, you know, and I think that's important for the young guys on this team as well. And so I'm excited to see Ben kind of implement that in his vision.
And it feels like that's something the players were craving, where they wanted to be coached a little bit tougher. They wanted to have some accountability amongst themselves. And like when you're a great athlete or somebody who really is striving to get better, you don't mind that hard coaching, like somebody getting on you, challenging you to be a better player, to be a better person. And it was Adam Hodge who even brought this up about like DJ Moore, who people accused of being checked out at times last year, canceled his family vacation to come back to Chicago to be a part of this today. He could have just sat there and posted an Instagram story from wherever he was and been like, hey, can't wait to get to work. No, he made it a point to be there. And that's the kind of leadership I think that has been kind of, there's the photo of those guys right there. And by the way, Caleb Williams comes walking in there. Now we see Caleb Williams a lot in sweats doing whatever. He looks like the Dark Knight. He's coming in with the leather coat, like he's ready, new haircut, like he's ready to go.
Well, I'm gonna share this clip on social media here later, but with his interaction with Hoagie, revealed that he was coming in like Neo from the Matrix with the long black jacket. So
that's better.
Hey, no more nonsense. Business only for Caleb Williams. New haircut and the Matrix jacket. Let's go.
No, I love everything about that. Actually, I think we have a clip from Caleb. Do we have a clip of Caleb talking about Ben Johnson? Because I do want to talk about this if we get a chance.
He's a no nonsense guy, but he'll always have my back, always have the support, always give me support, and so that was one of them, was the structure, the no nonsense, holding me accountable, and us two being on the same wavelength. Him being obviously all the way at the helm of it, and him being the head coach, and then me being the quarterback. Me being accountable, me being on the right time, right page, on the field, and doing those things right, doing everything right. And then from there being able to hold everybody accountable, from my space to and me being quarterback to him being the head coach, and us being on the same wavelength like I talked about is really important, because then when you get to be able to be on the same wavelength with your OC / head coach now, or not OC but play caller and head coach, and the way that we go about our business, the competitive fire that we have, the discipline that we have towards each other, the accountability that we have towards each other. That was another big part, was being able to, he said he's going to hold me accountable, and he's like, I want you to hold me accountable for a multitude of things. And we talked about other things, and about my play, about what he's excited about, and what he wants to change and correct, and if not change and correct, but just better.
How do you think this relationship's going to go?
Well, I think it's off to a great start, because my biggest question going into today was, does Ben Johnson really understand what the task at hand is, what the challenge is ahead? Because you can talk about coming here because of all the potential that Caleb Williams has and all the amazing talent that he possesses. But there's also been 12 months of things that have gone wrong here. And Caleb acknowledged that. In that quote, he's talking about, hey, I'm going to have a coach here that's going to hold me accountable. I hear Ryan Polsey earlier on an interview with ESPN 1000 where he says about what went wrong with Caleb Williams last year. I really think at some point there were some steps skipped to get him to game day, and we need to go back, and I know Ben is going to do it. Go back and reestablish that foundation. So that tells me that there were no secrets in this interview process. They told him everything that Caleb possesses and the things that need to get corrected. Caleb acknowledged that in that quote. Ben has been told that by Ryan Poles, and then he still took the job because he believes that they can get this on the right track. Now it just comes down to these two guys putting in the work starting this spring, and hopefully even before that, because it's going to take that kind of mentality, and it's a total reset. And I really just am optimistic that they can wipe away the stain of 2024 and brighter days ahead here in 2025.
Yeah, I heard one of the pushbacks on this, and I've heard this from an NFL insider who I hope to have on the show here. But when I was doing the NFL insiders on Monday night, and one of the guys, it was Garofalo. Like he knows I'm going to talk about this because I'm trying to get him on the show this week. He was like, "Oh, it'll be interesting." And so I'm sitting there with my Bears hat on. Like, of course, Garofalo comes in here, calls it, of all things, interesting. They were talking about this thing about like, hey, Ben Johnson's really intense. And like, there were times where Jared Goff, you could see during games being like, hey, while he's getting the play call, like, calm down, like, whatever. And they're like, I don't know if Caleb Williams that's going to work with Caleb Williams. To which I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I feel like Caleb Williams is a pretty even keel guy who's not going to freak out about that kind of stuff. And I think that that's something that he would probably appreciate and be able to thrive on. What do you make of that? I mean, I think it's good. I think it's a good mix. I think both these guys are going to get along. And obviously, Ben Johnson feels that way because he didn't take any other interviews. I think it's pretty evident that he feels like he can work with Caleb Williams.
100%. He takes his job without an in-person. He's saying, I believe I can make this work. But the work still has to be done. Yeah. So I, can feel optimistic about that potential. But when you look at Caleb Williams' coaches of past that did work, Randy Trivers, his high school coach, or if you look at, Lincoln Riley in college, those are guys that connected with Caleb and got the most out of him. And so Ben Johnson has to find a way to that same connection. And ultimately, it comes down to trust. And when you look at what happened last year with Shane Waldron and how things fell apart fairly quickly, and then you see at one point as they're getting shellacked in a game and Shane Waldron's trying to smile over at Caleb Williams, Caleb's not laughing, man. It's not funny. This is their livelihoods at stake, and everybody kind of, copes in different ways. So I'm not trying to accuse Shane Waldron of not taking the moment seriously, but I just think you got to find people that are on your wavelength, right? And the hope here is that Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams are. But until they get down on that practice field and get to work, we can talk about it, but they got to go out and do it. So, I feel optimistic about it. I'm certainly hopeful as a Bears fan, but I think for all of us, we understand that the hard part is still to come. The work still has to be done. And I'm excited for that. How many times as a Bears fan have we been able to say we got the number one pick, the quarterback that everybody wanted coming out of college, a guy that Sean Payton said was one of the best quarterback prospects he's ever seen. And then this year come away with the head coach that guys like Brian Baldinger and some of the ones that cover this sport for decades saying he's one of the most, revolutionary offensive minds they've ever seen, call a game, from a play calling standpoint. We're not used to having those kind of guys here, the bell of the ball. And so we've gotten that 2 years in a row. Now you take those and combine it, and let's go find some success in the regular season and not just in the off season.
Yeah, it's very rare that we go out there and we shop for our coach at Nordstrom's. We're usually picking them up at Goodwill and being like, okay, maybe this is fine. Like, hey, this slightly used Mike McCarthy will be something that we can go out there and probably make work. A couple of things, though, on that part of it. Number one, are the kids who pranked Caleb Williams, are they absolved? Are we good now?
They're off the hook.
Are they off the hook?
They're off the hook. Lose his number. Well, he's changed his number.
He had to change his number.
He's changed his number, but yes, let's stop harassing Caleb.
Yeah.
He hasn't been on Twitter in a year, it feels like. And you barely see him in commercials. You saw him in a bunch of commercials in college. He hasn't been in any, right? When you talk about high maintenance, like Caleb's a homebody, right? I haven't seen him in a million commercials. How many podcast interviews has he done besides I'm on Ross St. Brown's? Very little. He's not trying to be in front of the camera. So that tells me that his priorities are in line as far as wanting to be great at football. But now you got to have that coach find his way there. So, to me, I think Caleb is, a good dude and wired the right way, but he's also a young guy, not a kid anymore. But, when I was his age, I was a kid. Right. And so he's got growing up to do just in life. That's what all of us go through at his age. And So now that maturation process continues. I'm sure the last 12 months have served him a lot of humility, trying to find your way in the NFL. And so now you get a coach that can kind of try to take you to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, like, we couldn't have asked for a better situation over the last couple of years, and now it's just a matter of taking advantage of it. I do have to ask, though, because the last time you were on, and I was not having any part of it, you were trying to sell us on Mike McCarthy.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back in hindsight, did you actually believe any of the words you were saying about Mike McCarthy?
100%. 100%. I have zero regrets, and it wasn't a sell job, wasn't a bit. Wasn't just a talking
it wasn't
head.
Like saying made is better than swingers.
That's also a completely genuine take. I never said McCarthy was better than Ben Johnson. Like
No, I know.
Like Made is better than swingers. But I will stand by that. I thought both were good options, and not to relitigate, but the fact of the matter is, we know who Mike McCarthy is as a coach. We know who he is as a guy that can build a culture in a locker room. We know how he's going to handle an offense, and we've seen and know how he develops quarterbacks. With Ben Johnson, we know how he calls an offense, but we do not know how he develops a quarterback at the age of Caleb Williams. We do not know how he develops a culture in a locker room as a head coach. We do not know how he calls plays on the sideline as a head coach. There's a lot. We do not know how he's going to handle George McCaskey and Hallis Hall for years to come, and not just for a day and a half. So this is all very exciting, but there's still a lot of question marks that have to be answered. And for every Bears fan out there, I encourage you to be optimistic. And anything we've seen over the last day and a half with Ben Johnson standing in front of a podium should serve you to be optimistic about the future. But the fact of the matter is, they still have to go out there and prove it. And that was, I think, the thing for me when you hear Ben Johnson talk about going out and working for it and not making promises, not going up there and doing the LeBron, not 4, not 5, not 6. He didn't do that. And so for me, that's why I liked there was no rhetoric, none of the word salad and promises that you can't prove you can keep them. So that's where, for when you talk about Mike McCarthy being a good option, I just understood. I knew what I was signing up for with him, and I think that is a good coach. And I think a team like the Saints would do great with him. And now we have Ben Johnson here, and I'm excited for that. So, you're always going to get authenticity from me, Adam. And so I will never lie to my audience. And yes, I still think he's a good head coach, but I am excited for Ben Johnson to be the head coach of the Chicago Bears. And I'm hopeful that some of the questions that I listed get answered fairly quickly here.
Yeah, and it's similar to why I was, and I still wasn't ready to make a commitment to Mike McCarthy, and I still was kind of out on him. I would have rather have gone with somebody else, like even if it didn't work out with Ben Johnson, would have rather have gone down the road of bringing in Liam Cohen or somebody else who, given an opportunity to go out there, even if he's a first-time guy, because I feel like with coaches like Mike McCarthy, you know what the ceiling is. But I think the ceiling with Ben Johnson is much greater. There's an opportunity for him to be the next Sean McVay or somebody like that who's, we're going to be in the title chase every year. We're not just going to be this also-ran team that goes out there and wins during Toyota-thon and then disappears in the playoffs every year. So if you were feeling great about –
Well, and I had a friend, and I, like, again, not to relitigate the Mike McCarthy thing, but I had a friend who preferred Mike over Ben. I didn't go that far with it, but and my friend said this. He said, we are hoping that Ben Johnson can have the resume that Mike McCarthy has. And that is a fair statement. Like, would you take a head coach
with a Super Bowl
games over 500, won a Super Bowl, had two or three 12-win seasons with Dak Prescott, has a 3 decades of developing quarterbacks. Like, I hope 20 years from now that he has that exact same resume, Ben Johnson here, right?
Yeah.
So, we're going with the new guy, and that's all the hope. But, he's still got to earn it. And he very well could be the next Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, and any other name that's come out here lately that's been successful. Matt LaFleur, Kirk, Kevin O'Connell, obviously still trying to build their resume. But it's an offensive league now, and this guy has had the top offense in the league, one of the top 5 offenses in the league the last 3 years. 70 touchdowns for the Detroit Lions. But then the other thing I like too, Adam, and I know I'm ranting here, but the other thing I like too is that he said, we're not running the Detroit Lions playbook next year.
Yes. 100%.
And so that's another big thing. That's an understanding of football. Matt Nagy tried to come here and run the Chiefs offense with Mitch Trubisky, right? That's square peg, round hole. You have to adapt to the personnel you have. Why are the Baltimore Ravens good every year, but their quarterback circumstance goes from Joe Flacco to Lamar Jackson? 2 totally different quarterbacks. But John Harbaugh understands you got to adapt to the players you have. And so Ben Johnson saying, hey, we're not running the Detroit Lions playbook. Well, that's because Caleb Williams isn't Jared Goff. And the roster the Bears has isn't the Detroit Lions roster. So I like that. That's refreshing. That's a coach that understands you can't fit a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, if you were going to buy Caleb Williams cards a week ago, you should continue to buy them now. And of course, if you're going to buy sports cards, our friends at Windy City Sports Cards specialize in buying and selling all things related to Chicago sports. Whether you are a fan of the Bears, Bulls, Cubs, White Sox, Blackhawks, Sky, or Fire, we have got you covered with an extensive selection of sports memorabilia and collectibles. And in addition to their Chicago-focused items, they have a wide variety of other items available at your disposal or perusal or whatever. If you want to cash in and see some Ichiro stuff, which, by the way, he's not a unanimous Hall of Famer. The Baseball Hall of Fame is so precious sometimes. Oh, we can't make Ichiro, of all people, unanimous, but whatever. We're not here to talk about that. Did want to make one more point about the offense. And again, I think I was talking about I don't know. I've done so many shows. I've been on so many shows. So if I'm resharing a story from earlier, I apologize. But being on the driving range, listening to these 2 copiumatics sitting there trying to how does a guy who is so specific with Jared Goff going to make that work with Caleb, who likes to work off platform and off? I'm like, I didn't interrupt him because I didn't want to do it. But although I will tell you, the last 2 days, I swear to Great Caesar's ghost himself, I have found a spot at the driving range next to some dude who's telling somebody who is better than them how to play golf. There was a young lady next to me who was just striping the ball. Such a good player. And this old man's like, you know what you should do? I'm like, you know what you should do, old man? Shut up. Nobody wants to hear it, especially not her, because she's better than all of us. Leave her alone and let her do her work. But yesterday, these guys were talking about it, and I didn't interject because I don't need to, because I have my own platform here. But I think a lot of what you saw, the structure that you saw with the Detroit Lions, and this is why he brought this up, is that, and this is no disrespect to Jared Goff, but maybe a little bit, is that Jared Goff is not an elite level talent like Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or somebody like that. He's a good player. I know he was a number 1 overall selection. We get it. However, he has to keep him very much bottled in. You got to run the football and you got to limit what you're asking him to do, which is why he was able to go out there and be so successful. Now he's got Caleb Williams, and he understands what Caleb Williams is all about. And as he continues to grow with him, as you were talking about previously, he is going to find ways to tap in to what makes Caleb Williams so special. Like, think about the play with Jared Goff where he faked that he was fumbling, and he gets up and throws the ball. Right. Like, that creativity is going to now be used on a guy who can do more than just pratfall. Like, it's very believable to think that Jared Goff is out there stumbling over his shoes. But with Caleb Williams, you now have more opportunities to explore a playbook, to do some things. And it's not going to all come in the first 4 weeks of the season. Sure. But over the course of their lifetimes as NFL coaches and players, they're going to go through that. So this is why it's such a good mix, is because he gets to work with somebody who can improvise a little bit, build on some stuff. Like, yeah, we have more freedom to do things. It's kind of like, when you're a professional wrestler and you're Hulk Hogan and you know 3 moves, it's like, okay, well, every one of your matches is going to end up with you getting your butt kicked, hulking up, clothesline, boot to the face, leg drop, 1, 2, 3. Whereas Shawn Michaels or Bryan Danielson or somebody is able to go out there and do a wide variety of things. We might not have seen the best of Ben Johnson yet because he hasn't really had a quarterback that can go through and really explore his mind and explore the space.
Sure. No, I agree with that. And, I think we probably would vibe with Ben Johnson pretty well. He comes off like this mathematician, nerd guy. But then when you hear stories about how Ben Johnson, when he first got with Jared Goff, he had like a 3-day jam session, as he called it, to try to figure out what Jared Goff likes to do. And that's how he started to build his playbook and what his offensive system would be, to build it around the quarterback, similar to what we heard is what he's going to start trying to do with Caleb, try to find things that he's comfortable with. And so I think that's, a peek behind the curtain of why he has a good understanding of the right approach to building an offense. He also credited John Shoup as somebody he looked up to as a mentor. And one of the quotes he had was, when he's attacking an offense, because one of the biggest things when you talk to analysts of the game, and I always cite Brian Baldinger because I have the utmost respect for the way he breaks down the film, and I know you love him too with everything you guys work side by side at NFL Network, but he always would say how impressive Ben Johnson's offense was because every week it was something different, how they would morph their offense predicated on who they were playing each week defensively. And so it was never a certain system. He takes what the defense is going to give him. And when he was asked today, he said, one of the things that John Shoup always taught me was make the same things look different and different things look the same. That might sound like a quote out of Dr. Seuss, but that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to confuse the defense through different types of formations where you run the same play out of different formations, and then the same formation where you're running different plays. And so that's going to have the defense on their heels. You use that misdirection. You use that motion to set up easy throws for your quarterback. And if you look at what Washington's doing, and I know how annoying their fans can be online, but if you look at what Cliff Kingsbury's doing with Jane Daniels, he understands who he is as a quarterback, and he's calling plays accordingly to get the most out of him. And so Ben Johnson seems to have the same kind of understanding of how to call plays.
Yeah, I call that the Italian restaurant menu, where the Italian restaurant menu, like, you understand, it's like 3 ingredients. It's a pasta, whether it's in a little long spaghetti noodle, it's rigatoni, like whatever, but it's always like the same. It's like basically the same ingredients, but provided in different ways. You want it in manicotti? Do you want it penne? Do you want it angel hair? Do you want it in a lasagna noodle? Like whatever it is, like it's still basically the same, but it comes at you in a variety of different ways, however you fancy it or anything like that. And that's the one thing that I'm really excited to see these guys get into the lab and really start to understand each other and vibe and all that stuff. I do know that there was a Garofolo was telling me this too, is like Ben Johnson did have a habit of like locking himself in a room and just going out there and maniacally addressing his game plan and everything, which obviously you can't do as the head coach of an NFL team, but you can bring in some assistants who can help alleviate you a little bit. What's the latest on the coordinator situation? I know they can't hire anybody quite yet. Do we still believe it's going to be Dennis Allen and Frank Leahy or Fraley and all those guys?
Well, it's interesting because yesterday, there was some talk that maybe Hank Fraley would come here, but then we're hearing today from guys like Brad Biggs, and I've heard some stuff behind the scenes that would suggest that Hank Fraley isn't going to come here. But nothing's official as of this moment. So I don't think you leave anything off the table. But right now, the momentum rumor mill is saying that Hank Fraley won't come here. So that leaves you to guessing who the quarterback or the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach and things of that nature is going to be. Aaron Glenn gets hired by the New York Jets, and Mark Brunell's name is getting linked to potentially being an OC there. If I'm the Chicago Bears and Hank Fraley's not coming here, I'm putting a full court press to try to get Mark Brunell to come here and be the offensive coordinator, because I want to try to surround as many quarterbacks like that and people that understand offense and have been there and done that. Like a guy like Mark Brunell could be a great thing for Caleb Williams. So that's what I'd be looking at, but it sounds like Aaron Glenn is thinking that as well. When you talk about Dennis Allen, I saw some people in the chat. They call it they had like a fireside chat with Ben Johnson after his podium, press conference. He went off to the side and talked with the media, and they called it a fireside. And I'm on the show. I'm like, what the heck does fireside mean? Well, apparently this came back from FDR back in the day when he.
Did you not know what it was? I thought you were being.
No, why didn't you think I paid attention at school? Come on now, I was skipping class.
Our Canadian producers understand where fireside chat came from.
Yeah, well, I didn't, because I was too busy partying and not being in school.
Oh, you were so cool.
Yeah, I am still cool, was cool. And you know what's great? I always tell everybody every year, I'm as shocked as everyone that I didn't peak in high school. But the fact of the matter is I did not peak in high school. I continue to ascend, but didn't know what fireside was. And neither did Philip Miziano in the chat as well. So thank you, Philip. But going back to Dennis Allen, I'm
glad we're getting rid of the Department of Education.
Yes,
this will help.
And both my parents were teachers for 40 years too.
Oh my God.
I'm sure they're very proud of me. But you know what? I showed them, because I didn't go to school. I barely graduated, and look at your baby.
Look at me now.
Look at your baby boy now. I told my son.
You're in the same spot as a guy who graduated from the Harvard of the West Coast.
Exactly right. I told my sophomore year English teacher that I was going to make it. She didn't believe me because I was never in class, but there you go. Eat your crow. But going back to Dennis Allen and this fireside chat, when talking about Dennis Allen, he said that he was highly recommended by Aaron Glenn and Dan Campbell, but he had never met him personally and never coached against him. So like all this momentum about Dennis Allen becoming the defensive coordinator. Well, at this point, it hasn't been announced. And then you've got Ben Johnson saying, "Oh, I've never talked to the guy." So like, I don't know where this is going, but he did talk about in the press conference how important it is when he's building his staff to try to get some people with experience in here, so he can have coaches in this room that he can trust that have done the job. So I don't think Dennis Allen is off the table at this point, but I think that is one thing. When you talk about the things we don't know about Ben Johnson, one of them always was, well, when you compared it to a guy like Mike McCarthy, we don't know what his coaching staff will look like. And one of the big things that they always say about a mark of a good coach is a good coaching staff that he builds and his guys, quote unquote. So I don't know if we're really at that point with Ben Johnson. That's not to say that this won't work out, but we still have to see him build his coaching staff, see who these guys are, and see how they fit with Ben Johnson. Because as we learned with Matt Eberflus and the offensive coaching staff, where it started with Luke Getsy and some different guys, and then transfers over to Shane Waldron, these guys were not Matt Eberflus guys. And even though one side was offense and the other side of the ball was defense with Matt, they never saw eye to eye, and that cohesion is important. So these interview process where you're talking to these different guys about being a potential coordinator, there has to be some symmetry. So if I'm looking at OC, like you brought up, if Hank Fraley's not an option, I'm looking at Mark Brunell. I'm looking at Antoine Randall because they came from Detroit. They have a working relationship with Ben Johnson. They understand the standard that needs to be met to coach these players up. And another guy that I'll throw out there is Deuce Staley, who's currently on the Cleveland Browns coaching staff. If he wants to come over here and be the OC, watching him on Hard Knocks a few years ago with the Lions coaching staff, I think that's the right kind of energy and player experience that he can give to, the guys in that locker room. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Yeah, what is that? So is Fraley going to stay in Detroit? Are they going to let him call the plays, or what's the deal?
Well, that's the thing. And that was kind of, I felt like the tell yesterday, even though people were saying like, hey, it may sound like Hank Fraley goes to the Bears. It didn't really make so much sense to me because he interviewed to be the offensive coordinator in Seattle.
Yeah.
So that tells me he wants to call plays. If you're coming to Chicago to be the OC, you're not calling plays. Ben Johnson is.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to use, to become an offensive coordinator, you're stepping your stair-step ladder to becoming a head coach. Well, you kind of hit a brick wall here in Chicago to be the OC because you're not calling plays. So what do you have to go off of? If you're Hank Fraley, you take the OC job here, you're going to have that offensive line experience. You're going to help Ben Johnson get his ducks in a row, but you're not going to get any credit for the offensive success. Ben Johnson's going to get it. But I feel like a guy like Mark Brunell, if he comes here and is the OC, he may not call plays, but at least he can get partial credit for developing Caleb Williams. And so, like, for me, again, if I'm picking between Deuce Staley, Antoine Randall, or Mark Brunell, I'm going full court press. I'm flying the private jet out again. We got Ben Johnson on the private jet. Fly the private jet out again and bring Mark Brunell back here because it sounds like that would be the right fit. And I've also heard that they were friends, and pretty close in Detroit. So it makes a lot of sense to me. So I'm hoping Aaron Glenn doesn't steal him from us.
Yeah, when they were talking about Ben Johnson going to Jacksonville, they thought it was going to be a lock that Mark Brunell would go there because obviously Mark Brunell played quarterback for the Jags back in the day, and it would make a lot of sense for him to go out there and go back home to Duval County. But obviously that did not work out, much to the chagrin of the Jacksonville fans who.
And then they fired Trent Baalke today.
That's you know what? I know that I don't want to say I don't want to kick the Jags fans when they're down because I know that they're going through.
Oh, they've got to be furious. It's not even kicking them while they're down. They've got to be rioting in the streets. Like, that's absolutely, when you talk about the good process the Bears did through this to get Ben Johnson, what in the world were the Jags doing? Because if I'm a Jags fan, I'm very upset right now.
Yeah, and how wonderful is it that it's not us for a change? Like,
For
that's
real.
usually the kind of stuff that the Bears would do. Be like, oh, you know what? We didn't get Ben Johnson or Mike McCarthy or whatever. Like, now we're firing Ryan Poles. You're like, what is going on? What are we doing? But it all feels good right now, although there's still some questions remaining about the coaching staff and all that good stuff. But listen, I want to thank you for being here. I know we could go on forever, but I got an all-star team. I got an all-star team to go coach. Oh, my gosh. Poles still needs to still bring talent and wins. Chubbs, like, I'm not going to argue with you about that. Listen, we have plenty of time to get into that. What needs to be done? We're sitting here, we're talking about that. We barely scratched the surface on what this coaching staff is going to look like over the next couple of weeks. We're going to start going into our draft prep, free agency. We have free agency, then we have the draft. There's still a lot of work to be done. Like, by no stretch of the imagination does anybody think that the work is done. Like, there is a lot left to go.
The NFL offseason never stops. We got Senior Bowl next week. You got the Super Bowl media week after that. You got the Combine. You got the East-West Shrine game. We got free agency. So we'll be in the summer before you know it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things. So yeah, Chubbs, thanks for the super chat. We know there's plenty of stuff to still go on. And you know what? People still have some stuff. It's great. Like, obviously, did Ben Johnson win the press conference and all that stuff? He did. And that's the truth. And for anybody who wants to remain skeptical and be like, we've been down here before. Okay, that's fair. Because you look at the history of the Bears, you're like, okay, well, I can't argue against history. I can't argue against facts. However, there's reasons for optimism because this is a different process than what we've seen over the last number of years where we actually got the guy that we wanted. We actually got the quarterback that we need. I think we're ready. We just got to go out there, as you said, and go out there, get those ducks in a row and go get those wins and go get those victories. So we have so much to unpack over the next couple of weeks, and we will be here to do that, not only here, but we'll be on CHGO live on Friday at 2 o'clock Central?
12 p.m. Central.
What time do I come on? No, it's 1 p.m. Central.
1 p.m. Central. We'll work that out.
We'll work that out. I came on at 11.
Yes, sir. We'll work
All I
that
know.
out. But yes, we are at CHGO Bears. We're doing shows Monday through Friday. So
I'm finally invited onto CHGO
Adam,
to talk about
Adam
this.
will be on Friday, and I'll have to make up for all my wrongdoings on the mega show.
If you want to do that, make sure Carmen doesn't come on.
I will absolutely.
I don't want him to kill the vibe. Like, not now, Carmen. Like, you can come rain on our parade later. I
think you'll be surprised. He was he's a guy that overanalyzes press conferences at times and always has like negative thoughts that creep in, and he can't let those thoughts like stay in his brain. He has to speak them into existence. But he was blown away today by Ben Johnson, so that's a good sign for one. And two, like I think you guys are gonna have to work things out because I think he's scared that because you guys are just such opposites. Yeah. So he was like, "Does Adam Rank not like me?" And I was, no,
I like him. I absolutely like him.
And I told him, I was like, "No." When we were driving to training 100%. Camp earlier this year, he told me how much he liked you. But he's worried that you don't like him. And I was no. And I told Mark, I was like, "No, I don't like you, but I know Adam likes you." So
no, absolutely. No, I like him. Yeah. He's a good dude. I enjoy his company.
You're one of like 6 people that
it's okay.
Like him. His dad, you, a few others.
I'm glad to be a part of that elite company. And by the way, thanks to everybody for being here. Please like and retweet and all that stuff. Share with people. By the way, if anybody's listening, if you're interested, if you're on Instagram, if you can go search out AYSO, I should have had the address better, but it's region 143. It's the region that my teams belong to. I'm now in charge of their social media platforms. I'll do a better job of this next time, but I got to start building that because they're like, hey, instead of me having to go to board meetings, I'm like, I'll help grow your Instagram numbers because I'm an idiot. But in any event, thank you everybody for being here. We really do appreciate it. There's so much to talk about over the next coming weeks and months and all that stuff. So much to get into. We're just now scratching the surface. So for Greg, I'm Adam. Bear down, and Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcast. Brought to you by Circa Sports Illinois.